right.
Yes.
Great. So then with that, I will go ahead and call the Village of Essex Junction Board of Trustees to order for Tuesday, August 10th, 2021. Thank you all for joining tonight. Do we have any agenda additions or changes?
There's no additions or changes. Just note that the memo for 5C came out outside of the packet, but it went to the trustees and is up on the web.
Or will be if it's not yet. They have it to put up. Yep.
Along those lines, in case it's able to come in, or unless I've missed something, that memo refers to some documents or some maps to show that 200-foot buffer, and I didn't see it in that memo.
Oh, no, that's true, because that would have been a Robin map. That did come in, so I can share that when we get to it, and I can also email it to you now. I thought that he had forwarded that on. But yes, I can share that map with you now, and I'll definitely share it on the screen.
Awesome.
If it's just the dumpster map for the plaza there.
Yes, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure.
Trustees, any proposed agenda additions or changes?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, then there is no need to go or to approve the agenda as it's already done. Which will bring us now into public to be heard. So this is a portion of tonight's meeting where if there are members of the community who wish to voice something to the Board of Trustees, now is a time to do so. As I understand, nobody is to Lincoln. We will go ahead and prioritize Microsoft Teams users. So for those of you on Microsoft Teams, please go ahead, raise your hand or type into the chat feature to let me know that you wish to speak. And I'll be sure to give you the time. Please be prepared to only speak once. Please do be concise, and we will make sure to call on you. So first up, I see Andy Champagne. Mr. Champagne, go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine, yes.
Okay, so I was watching, I don't know if any of you guys watched Last Week Tonight. So a couple of weeks ago, John Oliver put out an episode about the first responders and how a lot of towns don't give them, they don't have very good benefits. You know, so like I was saying, since our paramedics and our police and our fire departments are volunteers, I was curious about what the health benefits are for like a town employee or something like that, and how good they are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Champagne. So with regards to benefits, Evan, I'm going to look to you if I get any of this wrong. So our fire department are paid on call volunteers, so they do not receive health benefits. With Essex Rescue, they are not town or village employees. They are a separate nonprofit, and so I don't know what their benefits are. That would be a question for them. As far as the town police department, I know that their benefits are different than the villages, and so to be honest, I'm not sure what they are. And Evan, I don't know if you'd like to fill that in.
Suffice it to say that while the pay portion by the employee to benefits range between our unions, all full-time employees have health benefits, dental, life insurance, and either a 401A contribution or a contribution into VEMRS, which is the state retirement system. There's about 13 days off that are holidays, and most employees start with a minimum of 2 weeks of vacation time.
Okay.
But Andrew is correct about volunteer firefighters.
I mean, how hard would it be to get them access to benefits? Because this COVID virus is going to kill us. I mean, it's already a third leading cause of death last year. It's going to be a third leading cause of death in the country this year, and it's going to be a third leading cause of death next year. So, I mean, unless, you know, they're showing up at people's houses in basically a bunny suit. And you know, they have no support. You know, if they get this thing, they're in for big bills. So I mean, it would be really great if we could give them benefits. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's gotta be some sort of way to make them like a part-time employee or something. Just bare minimum, allow them to get benefits so that they don't have to worry about any of this stuff. And it'd also be a great thing for like trying to recruit people to the fire department and paramedics, because no one wants to do those jobs in the first place. You gotta be crazy to go into somebody's house and be worried. I mean, you just be crazy. So, I mean, we should really do something.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne.
One quick note, when COVID vaccinations first came out, our first responders were able to be generally close to first in line. They have protocols for going into people's homes and dealing with people during this time that we're going through. That is not to say that they are fully protected or always protected in every situation that they're going into. But I take your comment, and we could certainly look into some of what might be able to be done, especially with some ARPA funds from the federal government.
Yeah, you know, it's really, you're basically playing a game against NAF is what you're doing. And COVID has the upper hand, because it's going to take us years to get through this. That means these guys have to go into people's houses every day, and they have to dodge COVID every time they go in. So, I mean, if you know, they're gonna get it. It's just a matter of time of bang. And so, I mean, we really need to protect these. We really need to make it so that, hey, if you get sick, don't worry about the medical bills. You don't have to worry about it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Next up, we have Gabrielle Smith.
Hi,
Gabrielle,
Andrew. Thank you.
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can go ahead.
I must get sick of hearing that question. So, I wanted to speak briefly about the police department and make you all aware that over 90 town of Essex residents submitted a letter to the select board communicating our hope and expectation that the two boards will indeed reach a resolution to keep the Essex provider of law enforcement services in the event of separation. And I just want to acknowledge that the board and Evan both have been really responsive. It's going to be on the agenda on the 17th, the topic, our letter, and the topic of the police department. Andy Watts has made it very clear that it's the intent of all 5 selectmen select members to preserve the Essex Police Department. I've provided you all can enter into an agreement, and I just want to ask that the 5 of you, in your efforts to ensure that we have strong law enforcement options before us, also minimize the investment of staff and your time in that endeavor, with the expectation being that we are going to have police services, and the hope that you all will reach a reasonable agreement for that shared service in the future. So thank you all very much for all that you're doing for our community, and your efforts to ensure that we indeed have a solid plan before us to vote on. So I appreciate that you're doing those efforts. I just want to also ask that we have, I hope, faith in both of our boards to do right for the future of our town. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabrielle. And speaking for myself, I am also hopeful that we are able to reach an agreement with the select board in terms of keeping police services for Essex Junction with Essex Police Department, and appreciate your efforts.
Andrew, we do have
Yes.
a member of the public in our audience, and maybe she might want to, I don't know. Irene, do you have any comment on public to be heard?
Yeah, comment. May I say her?
Certainly. Andrew, I want to take over, but.
There were no other hands on Microsoft Teams, so she is more than welcome to.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Go right ahead.
Andrew? I'm looking at the priorities that the trustees sent to the select board. And under budget, which was priority number 9, it says the village pays money to the town for services / departments that the village already has and do not serve village residents. I can't think of any town departments that do not serve village residents, namely the planning that's done for the town outside the village still has the ability for village residents to fill any or all of the seats on it. And of course, I know plenty of people in the village who enjoy the scenic views and open spaces, for example, when they truck out to Chapin Orchard in the fall. So that's one department that you may think or may be able to rationalize does not serve village residents, but so long as they sit on the Town Planning Commission, I believe that statement that you have on the priorities list is false. The Town Fire Department certainly responds to mutual aid in the village. The Library Board for the Essex Free Library does not exclude anyone from the village from coming to borrow things from the collection or from serving on their board, last I knew. And so, of course, recreation, plenty of village residents enjoy services like membership passes to Indian Brook Reservoir. So I would hope that the next iteration of your priorities document omits this very false statement. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the statement. By that same logic, I could see somebody saying that simply because town outside the village residents don't pay taxes to Essex Junction Recreation and Parks and or the Essex Junction Community Development Department, that the town outside village residents absolutely benefit from those services. So benefit and payment and duplication are not necessarily always the same thing, but thank you anyways. Personally, I will see that likely staying on that list. Is there anybody else in the room that wished to speak who has not yet spoken?
No.
So then seeing,
Did you?
all right, we will go away from the room back to Microsoft Teams, and I see Annie Cooper. Go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I just want to thank you all for all your hard work. I think everything looks great and you all are crushing it. And I look forward to learning more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie. Tim Miller, go right ahead.
I'll leave my video off so as not to screw up the connection. I just wanted to speak to, I hope that you leave that list on there. It's particular as it speaks to the fire departments. Town fire department doesn't necessarily serve the village. A mutual aid agreement is a very different animal. Excuse me. The village has mutual aid agreements with Williston, with Colchester, St. Michael's, Underhill, and numerous other departments around. Yet they don't look for anything from us in return. It's just an understanding that goes around. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Tim. All right, seeing no other hands up, we will go ahead and move off of public to be heard and on to our next item, our first business item, which is the work session on Essex Junction Independence Initiative. Hello, Brad.
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic.
Good.
Hopefully the same is true for you.
Yes, it is. So a quick preview for tonight. We're just going to review the intergovernmental and committees list that we talked about last time. We're going to have an initial conversation about what kind of education materials and timing the trustees would like to get out to the residents. There's some information about the village center designation and the neighborhood development area designations that comes up later in your agenda, but also will be part of the work session. There's a couple of minor charter additions and changes. We're going to talk a little bit about city police services, local options tax, retail cannabis, and there's 2 sets of FAQs from the Our Village, Our Voices folks.
That, Brad. So the way we have been doing this, for those who may be new, if there are any comments that anybody from the public has on any of those items, we will take those now. And then once we get into the work session, we will not be taking additional public comments on those items. So just to reiterate, those are intergovernmental and committees. Those are community education materials and timing, the village center and neighborhood development area designations, charter changes, the city police services, local options tax, retail cannabis, and frequently asked questions from our Village Our Voices. So again, why don't we start off this time with those in the room? Is there anybody in the room who wishes to speak to any of those items? Okay, thank you. Going into Microsoft Teams, please go ahead, raise your hand or type into the chat feature if you wish to speak to any of those items. I'm not seeing any hands up. There's nothing in the chat, and I'm also not seeing anybody on the phone. So we will come back to the board and back to Brad to take it away with intergovernmental and committees.
Great, so it's page 11 and 12 in the packet. It's just an update from our last conversation. So there's an intergovernmental list that has some estimated budget numbers based on FY22. If the city had been an independent city for FY22, those are some best guess estimates of what the city would have paid for those intergovernmental services. And then the next page, page 12, is just a summary of the committees and commissions that you all talked about last time. So this is just on there for your information, and certainly if you have questions or comments, it's up for discussion.
I personally don't have any. Other trustees?
I don't. I appreciate the effort that went into this, Brad, and it's nicely organized, and I don't have any questions. Everything conforms to what my understanding of how things are.
Great.
Good to go to the next one.
So the next item up for discussion is what sort of education materials the trustees would like put together to inform the community about the vote, and when they would like those to go out and what format. There were two, sorry for the lengthy packet again, but there were two there was the report from 1996, which was included in your packet as an example of some potential materials that could be put together. And then obviously the greater Essex 2020 packet was in there as another example of materials that could be put together to go out. So I open it up for you all to discuss what you envision and what you'd like to include.
When I think about what we just did with the merger vote and then the revote, while that packet certainly did have a whole host of information to really answer many, many questions, the feedback I received from many peers is it was way too much, and that much of it was not reviewed. And I instead wonder about more of like a brochure of pamphlets, a postcard with a link, something where there are some real important notes like dates and maybe some high level financials as to why I should do this, but then a link or some other way to get to some more detailed information. Amber, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, basically I was going to agree with everything that you said. I think one thing I would like to see is if we could put this, if it's not on there, the 96 study on the Independence website for folks to see. I thought it was really well written, and it's funny how things keep going forward, but yet they never change, kind of. And that kind of reiterated it in this report. What was said many times was the public needs the facts. And I really like the straightforward way of saying, here's what we're going to save. And I don't think that we can necessarily do that, but I think as close as we can come to being able to do that would be the best. And I also agree with you that the merger pamphlet was really very helpful, but people lose focus very quickly. And so something short and succinct.
Dan or George, any other thoughts on?
I mean, I agree. I don't have any strong feel. I mean, I've got strong feelings about what we should do. I'm not sure. I probably maybe need more of a brainstorming session than in a trustee meeting And I know that we've got folks who are independently of us working. Elaine and Gabriella have put together facts. I've been reviewing them and adding my 2 cents. And I think the way they've had them organized, it gives a nice pattern, because they're asking questions that they've already heard or they anticipate people will be asking, and then they're giving a short version, and then they're giving a longer, more detailed version. And that's probably a template for how we need to approach this, because for some people, they're really going to want to have a lot of information. They're really going to want to ponder this and weigh all the options. And for other people, it's TMI, and they just want a couple of punchy things. So I think we probably are going to need to anticipate some kind of a two-pronged approach to this. For those who just need a bit of information, and for those who are really looking for more of an analysis. And printed material, again, we probably have to, I'm sort of torn between when you send printed material out, how soon before the vote do you send it out there? Do you send 2 things out there? Do you have one mailing early on to sort of prime people, and then as you get closer to the vote, do you send out more? So I don't have good answers for all these questions. I do think that one of the main things we should be focusing on, though, is a pamphlet or something fairly short and punchy with a lot of graphics and a lot of positivity. And I think that should be a main focus that we work on. And then, as you said, maybe a website or a separate page where there's a lot of background information we can send people to. I don't have much more than that.
I think that all sounds great.
Yeah.
Roger, Dan?
I'll just echo what George is saying. I've spoke with Bridget Myers a couple times about the effort that you brought forward on this, and I'm hoping that we can keep the message a cohesive message, one message, as opposed to hearing from somebody outside the board that is giving a different opinion or a different statement. If we can stick to the same statement, same, facts are facts. Don't, divert from that with other people.
Andrew, can I Dan and all of you, I'd like to ask, and even you, Brad, and Evan and Marguerite, I'd like to get a sense of what you think, and don't all speak at once, but what do you think the level of understanding is among village residents, generally speaking, about what's going on? What's the level of understanding in terms of background? What's the level of understanding and also in terms of their interest and enthusiasm? Do you have a sense of it? And I only say it because I have been surprised when I've gone around over the last few months and bumped into people, and I've been surprised how much people are paying attention and how much they know what's going on. And that hasn't always been the case, but for some reason, maybe there's a lack of news or something, or the national news is just too grim, and so more people are paying attention to local stuff. I don't know, but it is interesting how many people seem to be aware of what's going on and seem to be kind of positive about what we're doing. But that's just my own personal anecdotal take on things. And I'm wondering what the rest of you might think.
I mean, this is Roger. I see a lot of enthusiasm for this, but I'm not seeing it from people that we haven't reached before. There's still, like in my life, there's still 2 camps, people that pay a lot of attention to this stuff and people I hang out with that have no clue, both in the town and the village. And only when those 2 parties, those 2 groups of people meet, do the people who are sort of disconnected go, what's that all about? And then they glaze over and they're gone. And I'm not picking on them. I just think this is, it's interesting for those it's interesting for, I guess. And I think, looking through these materials, I think that 96 report did a good job, probably more than we need to, of just giving the why. Why'd we end up here? The only thing I'd add to the first question would be, I think people are going to want to see the bottom line. I think we need to spend a lot of time, as much time as we possibly can,
Right.
on the bottom line, as best as we can know it. And I think that's going to be the determinant factor. I think people are going to want to know, is it enough to do this, to make this effort at separation? Am I getting enough of a savings out of it? And I think that's going to be a big calculus for people who are paying attention.
Go ahead, Amber.
Just to answer George's question, one thing that I do find myself seeing quite a bit is in my day-to-day life where folks who are living in Essex general have an idea about what's going on, but those folks who are moving into the village have no idea what's going on. So I try to educate folks who are sitting in front of me as to what's going on, but I'm seeing a very small portion. But I do think that we have a lot of transactions that are happening where we have folks that are coming into the village who just have no idea. And I don't know how to fix that, but that's just to answer your question, George.
Okay, thanks.
I would echo what Raj had said, as it really seems like there are those two camps. There are those who are paying attention, who really have been paying attention this whole time. And then there's everybody else. So I think that there's really not much in the middle. There are those two pretty opposite poles. It's all gonna, similar to where we've been before, it's how can we reach those who haven't been engaged and really help engage them in this process,
Right.
without making them glaze over when they receive material.
Right.
Well, if I can chime in, I just think, like you said earlier, or Amber brought up earlier, that less is more, that don't overwhelm them. Don't, present them with, page after page on each aspect of the separation, but just give them the bullets and some way to follow up if they have further questions or want to learn more about it. The simpler the better. You're gonna, I think, more visual stuff, as far as to make it catch their eye so that they look at it.
Brad, I think part of your question was also about what specific type of information. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
There were some things that were within that separation analysis back in the 90s that I think would be really helpful. That update of the status, there's a section called status quo, getting an update on that. The formal vote history of merger and separation. I know this is something that's been brought up a few different times in a few circles, and I think that would also be useful, especially for those who haven't been engaged in this process. I also found it interesting that assets listing of what the village has. I think that could be beneficial. Sarah's separation analysis, maybe not the whole analysis, but rather maybe those concluding pages where it really showed that what the bottom line would be. That departmental version might be too much, but I'm not wedded to it either way. I think just that information was very helpful to get us to where we are. There was also a graph as well as a table about the town versus village departmental expenditures. In one way to help show how much villagers are already paying for town services that we then would not need to pay with separation.
Right.
As well as, this was already discussed, that cost of current municipal taxes versus a proposal with independence, at least as much as we're able to get at within this point in time. Hang on a second, Dan. Oh, almost done. There was a table of independence versus status quo for departments and intergovernmental services, which I think would also help to answer the question of what residents would see and how their experience may be different or the exact same, depending on each department. So, for example, if the sewage is backing up into their home, would our residents see anything different? Would they need to call somebody different? Any differences with the library? Any of those types of things? As well as the perceived and assumed disadvantages. There was a portion on aspirational future possibilities. And then I know that the frequently asked questions is already being worked on. Just the whole thing.
Yep. No, that's helpful.
All right, Dan. Go.
No, I just, to echo what you're saying, you know, as far as the comparisons and the graphs, I'm thinking, when I said something, you know, image or something to look at, I'm thinking graphs, pie charts, something that's simple, you know, you don't have to read so much or analyze numbers and look at percentages. It's visually right there in front of you.
Yeah, I found that one graph that showed there was a stacked bar graph where it showed here's town expenditures by each department stacked on top of each other. Here's the villages over here, and then you had that error portion of we as an independent city, we wouldn't be paying that, and that's how the savings would come about. Really helps to tell the financial story right there. So trustees, was there anything else on that portion?
And
Brad,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that I think another portion was about timing.
Yeah.
I think if we were to, I don't know whether we need to do a save the date and then follow it up with another postcard, another mailing. But I think if we were to send something as soon as people are able to start voting, if we could really have that timeline work out well, I think that would be the most beneficial way to do it. We want to make sure that, you know, we don't send it a month before people can start getting ballots, and we also don't want to do it 2 or 3 weeks after they start receiving ballots, because one is way too early and be lost by the time they're ready to fill in a bubble. By the next portion, we will have already lost some people to making an informed decision.
So we're probably looking at, so Susan's hoping to get the ballots out by October 8th. So probably on your 9/28 public hearing / meeting, we would want to finalize content and let it go to press.
Sounds good. I assume at that point in time, would we also then need to vote to mail out ballots?
I think you're gonna need to be at least a week earlier to press, to get printing, get it back, and mailing is not always easy around here, and the delivery times. But I think you can coordinate with Linda from the office, because she did the last one. I think you just need it, but I think you're gonna need to be at least a week earlier with approval.
Yeah, I'm just, I would be a little nervous. I mean, I think we're going to be in design phase all the way up from now until then. I guess I'm anticipating that both your joint board meetings on 9/20 and 9/27 may inform some of the content. And that I guess it would be, it's going to be tight,
Yes.
but I think it may be, depending on what the content is, better to have some things nailed down a little bit more before you send that to print. So certainly I can start working with Linda on some of these concepts. We can figure out exact timing from the printer and the mailing. It might be close. The ballots may be arriving the same day or within a few days, but certainly to your point, Andrew, not 2 weeks after the ballots hit home, but it might be close. People might get ballots and get the materials, you know, within a day or two.
That'd be fine.
If we lose a couple of days, I mean, then we lose a couple of days. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is, and I would rather ensure people have accurate information than jump on it too soon.
Yep.
Was there anything else, Brad or trustees, on that item?
I'm good.
I think
Great.
the only question, Andrew, is I think George had mentioned possibly whether or not you guys would want just like a simple postcard, either a save the date or, you know, I think we know when the public hearings are. you know, you could do something more basic if you wanted to in advance. I'm not suggesting you have to, but I just would like to be clear as to whether or not that's something you would like to have happen, or you're fine without it.
I think I'm okay without it. We've already sent out one postcard, I believe, which had, you know, the website as to how to stay informed. I don't think we need another one.
Can I didn't want to, can I jump in, Andrew?
Yeah, please.
Let's go back to what you said, Brad, about public hearings. Now, we are going to have 2 public hearings, and I think we had anticipated having one large one potentially at the high school. Is that correct? Is that, because I'm a little confused. We kind of went back and forth. Is that the idea?
We have gone back and forth, so I'm glad you mentioned it. So currently that's back to not doing the large summit on that Saturday.
Okay.
And so it's on a Tuesday night when you didn't have a meeting scheduled, but that would be the first public hearing.
And are we anticipating these public hearings would be live, or are we basically aiming to have it mostly be an online audience? What is your thought? Let me get to the point instead of going around in circles. I'm thinking if we anticipate that there's going to be a large gathering of people, you probably also would. That's an opportunity to also have a handout for people in the audience to walk away with. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So that's like an additional printed thing that you know, it doesn't necessarily mean a completely different effort, but it means, you know, you could extract some of the stuff that you're from other sources that you're working on and put it into print, and you don't necessarily have to do a really fancy job on it since it's being just handed out. Sure. That's just a thought.
Okay. I think the idea for those 2 public hearings is to offer both for people to come and online.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Amber.
Brad just said what I was going to say.
What did he say?
I would really prefer that both of the public hearings are have both options available to folks, especially with the continued rise.
I know. That's why it's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Raj.
No, I think Our Village, Our Voices, I think that's the name, right? Our Village, Our Voice, are planning on doing a massive outreach as well. So any coordination, getting them the materials will also, I think we'll have a better experience with that than just simply mailing. And I will echo the hybrid, or frankly, making sure we're prepared for fully remote for this, which is why I think that, you know, working with that group to make sure this material gets out is also going to be important, because we may not have the opportunity to hand it out. Also might be good to figure out how the 5 of us can make ourselves available, but that's later. Not too much later, because I'm starting to look at the calendar and yeah.
We're only a month away, really, before we need to start informing the community, and wholeheartedly agree. I mean, right now we have 15 non-staff members who are here in attendance for this meeting, where typically when we were just in person, we wouldn't get 15 people, including the board members and staff. We saw it at the public forums, where the ability to have a hybrid option works really, really well. So want to make sure that we're able to maintain that regardless of where the pandemic is going or not.
Okay, that's helpful, I think. I think I'm good, Andrew.
Great. I think we're ready to move on. Unless Raj has another idea or something else.
So the next item is the village center and neighborhood development area designations that the village currently has with the state. This comes up later as a business item for you all. Actually, it's in your consent items.
Right.
But maybe, George, do you want to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, as we said before, we have these 2 designations. And they are valuable, and they're good things to have. They're tools that help us do thoughtful redevelopment in the village center. And we want to transfer those designations. And Elaine, who used to work for ACCD, helped us set up a meeting. I met with them. They didn't anticipate any problem with us just transferring those designations. And in fact, some of them were kind of questioning whether we even really had to contact them, since we're basically the same community. But others said, no, you're doing the right thing. But they suggested that we write a letter to the downtown board. ACCD has a downtown board that basically oversees all of these designation programs. And they recommended what we should put into a letter to provide to their downtown board. And I drafted up the letter based on that dialogue on my notes, and so that's what's in the packet. I sent it to Andrew. Andrew revised it, and it's in the packet for our approval. And if approved, it would be signed by all the trustees. It would go to the downtown board, and hopefully not a problem. They would just respond to us that fine. But it's sort of just like, dotting our I's and crossing our T's to make sure that there's not a problem there. But in the course of the conversation, they pointed out that they have planning money for to go up to what's the next phase of these designations, which is a Vermont downtown, become a designated downtown. And there are a lot of benefits there's an expanded realm of benefits if you become a designated downtown. But it also requires a lot of steps. You have to have a downtown committee made up of investors and business people and board members and private people. So it's a kind of a process. But the reason they brought it up, and I'm bringing it up now, is they have money to help you figure out that process and anticipate it and plan it. So I mentioned to them that this might be something that we would be interested in doing. What I'd like to propose is that I look, and you put some stuff in, we have some of the stuff about this in our packet tonight. I'd like to scope it out and flesh it out, and maybe in an upcoming meeting, not a really high priority because we're very busy, but go over it with you so that to see if we really want to move forward with this. And this is something we could, sort of independently of everything that's going on with our charter effort here. Start moving towards downtown designation. Since they have planning money that could help us, I would like us at least to consider doing that. But that's separate from the approval of the letter. That the letter is just the letter is just going to go to the board and get the approval from the ACCD that formally blesses our transfer of our existing designations. Long-winded answer, sorry.
Go ahead, Amber.
George, were you thinking that we'd apply for that downtown designation before, I guess, the vote?
Amber, I don't know enough about I don't know enough about the process and the timing of the process to give you a coherent answer.
Okay.
One of the things I'd say is that my reading of it, and this is one of the things I have to research, I don't think the village right now, because we're attached to the town, I'm not sure that we could get a downtown designation. I don't know. So that it might be contingent on us separating from the town if it goes forward. The other thing, a side benefit from all this, if right now the town, I think the town center cannot get certain designations because we already have them. And since you've got a designated center in your community already, the town can't get it. Again, I want to make sure, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure. And so one of the benefits for the town of the village separating is that they would become eligible for designation on their own as well, which would entitle them to transportation and other tax benefits for their town center development. Yeah, I'd like to look into it, but right now, Amber, I don't know. I think it's a pretty lengthy process to apply for it, and I wouldn't want us to get sidetracked, you know, in terms of energy, but if it looks like it's something we could do and move forward with, you know, along in parallel with all of our other efforts, then yeah, why not? We can give it a shot.
Yeah, I took a look at that as well, George, and it does seem like it is quite the lengthy process, but
Right.
I'm sure there are parts that we can get started sooner rather than later, so that way, should separation end up passing, that we're further along in that process than, you know, behind the ball.
Right.
But I see Robin Pierce, you have your hand up.
I do, Andrew. My sense from Richard and Moore, who basically runs the program, is it'd be better to wait to apply after the separation.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't mean you couldn't plan to apply, but his recommendation would be to wait until there was a separation.
Okay. And Robin, did I misstate anything there in terms of the town not being able to get a designation now because the village already has designations? Was that correct? Was that accurate?
Yeah, the town would have a better opportunity to get a downtown designation.
Okay.
If it was separate, which would help in terms, I mean, there's grants for all sorts of improvements, IT improvements, ADA improvements. If it's an older buildings, facade easement improvements, multitude of grants. At the moment, the designated village center, basically I'm the committee, but for a designated downtown, you do need a board. That's one of the requirements. There are additional benefits you can get. I would say it's probably 25% greater benefits for a downtown there is for a designated village center. Sometimes I'm a little frustrated when it comes out and they say, oh no, it's only for downtowns. It's not for designated villages as well. So there would be that, which would help the village and help the town.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Was there anything else on that?
I'm good. That's it.
Good. On to the next item. So the next item is just a couple of suggested charter additions and changes. The first is the city clerk appointment. In the last draft you saw, it said that the council had the power, but they could delegate it to the manager. Currently, the manager has that power in the village, so the suggestion is to continue to have the clerk annually appointed by the manager with council approval.
Makes sense.
Okay. The next portion is the language that discusses what George just talked about. Just acknowledging that the village center district and neighborhood development area will continue with their state designations.
Looks good.
Yep.
And the last item is a question of whether or not you want to include this in the charter and what you would like to include if you do. It's based on recent conversation at the select board in regards to agenda setting and whether or not you want to clarify that who sets the agendas for the city council in the charter or clarify that in some other way.
I think it would be a helpful thing to clarify, but I don't think the charter is necessarily the right way to do it. Given that if we ever want to change it, we have to then have a community vote, has to go back to the legislature. Instead, I think we just want to make sure to utilize the board's procedures or the adopted rules of procedure. I think we just want to make sure that that's an early task for the city council.
Sounds good.
Go ahead, Rush.
I'm having a lot of trouble with my buttons tonight. I apologize. I was just gonna say basically what you said, and I tried to not click the hand, so just forget it. Never mind.
Forgotten. Never happened.
Okay. Moving on to the next part. City Police Services, this is on page 162 of the packet. The last time we met, we discussed, you all reached a consensus on creating a backup plan if negotiations with the town don't come to fruition for police services. This is a first draft of a potential letter to send to these 6 different agencies to start that inquiry. The letter has not yet been sent, so it is available here for your edits, your comments, and I guess if your consensus still at the moment is to proceed with this at this time.
The letter looks good to me. And as I said earlier to Gabrielle's comment during public to be heard, certainly don't want to have to go down this road. I do hope that we are able to work with the select board to maintain the Essex Police Department being the police force for Essex Junction. At the same time, if we end up not being able to reach some kind of consensus with the select board, I think it's important to make sure that we are already some way down the road on a plan B instead of needing to react quickly. And yeah, this would help to set us up for a plan B if it's needed.
My only thought about it, if I can jump in, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I think I'm in favor of it, but I would anticipate, let's take Williston, for example. That'd be whether they would want to share their police or expand their police service into Essex Junction. That'd be a big conversation. So I think it's great to be anticipating it and thinking about it, but I would also anticipate it's a very big conversation that probably wouldn't get resolved in time. I don't think it probably wouldn't get resolved in time for us to put something into the ballot by November. I don't know. Dan, what are your thoughts?
My personal thoughts, I think dealing with another municipality police force such as Colchester, Williston, South Burlington may pose, or Colchester, whatever, they might pose a little more difficult negotiating that. The Chittenden County Sheriffs, I think because they're not your typical like municipality, I think it'd be an easier negotiation. It's not as complicated. You know what I'm saying? So that's just my 2 cents. And for that matter, the state police, as far as contracts go, you're not dealing with a town or a village municipality, you're dealing with the state. So it could be streamlined, and just throwing that out.
Yeah, and I certainly don't have any inside information to add any facts to this, but I would assume that, George, your assumptions are pretty accurate, that the ability to get to a place where we are able to say, this is who the police department would be, this is the agreement we've had and what it would mean for a budget. I do think it would go beyond a timeline that would allow us to have that information before the vote. Regardless, but I think that, at least getting this done now or taken care of now would allow us to expedite that process as best as we could.
Okay. So Andrew, I'm hearing no edits and proceed with getting this out at this time.
Hearing the same thing.
Okay. The second paragraph of this section, not this letter, but back in the packet, is a question as to whether or not you want another Plan B, which is to develop a City of Essex Junction police force. Right now, your 2 options. Option A, which is your preferred, is to negotiate with the town of Essex. Option B is to inquire with these 6 other services. Option C, is the only one that you really have full control of in terms of the future. The rest of these depend on negotiations with others, and whether or not they're interested in sharing or expanding their services. So the question here is this something you want to explore at this time? Is it something you want to consider down the road? You have your joint meeting on the 23rd. You could see how that goes. But essentially, the question is whether or not you would want to put out an RFP to have somebody in law enforcement assess the size of our community and put together a budget of what a city police force could look like.
I would think that if we go down that path, we would need to do it in tandem with an RFP for other departments in case those aren't able to come through, or even just to have, to have all the facts of the conversation, to really make sure that we're making an informed decision. I really hope it doesn't get to that point. But I mean, unless there are staff time restrictions, I don't see the harm in doing it, to at least be prepared. But again, I would defer as to whether there is the time to do such a thing.
Comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I think it'd be very difficult to do that. And I think the only benefit would be if somebody from the public were to ask, did you look at this? Not only I believe it'll be cost prohibitive, but also the time it takes to establish a police department and get it up and running, the infrastructure. I mean, we already have a police facility in our community, and then we're talking about creating a new facility somewhere in the, I don't think it would be wise route to go down that to really. I think it'd be pretty easy to see right from the beginning that it's not worth spending a lot of time on that, just for the cost and the time it takes. How difficult it is just to fill vacant positions at any existing police department, much less creating a whole new one.
Yeah, no disagreements for me on that one, Dan. Let alone the space, the physical building necessities, then hiring and staffing. Yeah, that would be a multi-year venture for sure. That I think has a lot of barriers, and that's why, to even hire a consultant to go down that path, we're talking again months, well beyond the vote's time frame. So again, if staff, for me and only me, if staff time allows for that RFP to be developed, then fine. If not, I'm okay with that waiting until that worst case scenario. I don't know if anybody has any strong opinions about. Yes.
I will. I think it's good to have it. I think generally speaking, it looks like our discussions with the select board are on a good track. It's important to have a backup plan, but I think we don't want to go too far in having a really incredibly elaborate, detailed backup plan. We probably don't need that yet. So from what I'm hearing from you, Andrew, and Dan, it sounds like, yeah, maybe that's just an unnecessary step at this point, Brad. I don't know. Is that the consensus?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Because that would be a lot of work, and it might be a lot of unnecessary work at this point.
Sure. Well, I think we meet again on the 24th, the day after the 23rd joint meeting. So certainly it's something that we can revisit if things don't go well on the 23rd. I'm guessing there are some law enforcement folks around the state who would be able to take that on and do that body of work relatively quickly if it was needed. Yeah. I think that actual creation of a report for somebody who's experienced in law enforcement to look at your 4.6 square miles and 11,000 people could probably come up with something pretty quick. Yeah. Great. On to local options tax. So there's some information in the packet. This was requested to be on the agenda for consideration in terms of the timing of independence and whether or not the board wants to pursue this, and if so, is it going to be in conjunction with independence? I think the only noteworthy piece I put in here, and I have reached out to the tax department and have not connected with them directly, is this challenge that to Sarah's best understanding is that there's not a real easy way at the moment to discern if a business is in the village or the town. And so the question to the tax department is, if the village or the city does it alone, will they be able to track those taxes? If the village and the town do it, will they be able to track the taxes and appropriate them correctly? I think Sarah went on to say that if this is true, then the best path forward is probably to develop some sort of financial relationship and understanding and contract between the town and the village, or the town and the city. So this is up for your discussion.
I think that this is an issue. I mean, I remember first talking to village meeting about this 4 or 5 years ago now. Frankly, I feel like it's been consistently pushed back, as we've said, merger will take care of this. We'll take care of it in merger, or, we'll wait until this other issue. For me, I think our community has waited long enough, and I'd love to see this. I'd love to see us have a local options tax vote ready for our annual meeting in April. I don't think we want to confuse the vote in November on separation in any way, shape, or form with local options tax. But instead, I think that if we do this in April, we'll have the answer to separation, at least in terms of our own village's vote. And then we can move forward with having this on our own, regardless of whether the town is there or not. I think this is, again, one of those times where we need to stop waiting for the time to be right. And let's just make the plan to do it in April. Amber, I think your hand went up first, and then Raj.
I'll just agree with what you said and leave it at that.
I'll agree with what you said and add a question. I think I asked the last meeting. We're likely to have the town vote on cannabis and then find out we're our own municipality. So I've looked too, and I haven't been able to find out, nor have I called anybody, frankly. Been able to find out what happens. Do we get to redecide as a community on cannabis? And if the town decides to offer retail, does not offer a local options tax, we become a separate city. We decide to offer retail, but we want an option. We want to add the local options tax. Is that scenario legit? Or do you get the one? Do you have to have the local options tax when you vote in retail, and you can't add it after? Which I kind of doubt that scenario, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to figure out timing for this. I do agree that I'd rather separate this from November.
I don't have facts to back this up, so please note this is an assumption. My assumption is that since the Village of Essex Junction is a municipality that has been recognized by the legislature, that we can have our own vote on cannabis, regardless as to what the town ultimately decides to do. I don't know if there is some portion of the statutes where it says that, except for villages within towns. I don't know if that is true, but I think that, again, we could move forward with this in April.
So just let me make sure I'm clear on what you're saying. So you're saying that, separation aside, if the village is going to decide whether it wants to offer retail sometime in the near future, separate from the town deciding as a whole, or is the town as the controlling body for like liquor control and everything else? I guess that's where I'm unclear. And if it's not us deciding as a village, the town decides, an establishment opens in the village, we become a city, they're already there. And if the village so it's, having the village decide, oh no, we changed our minds, is not really a possibility. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, what does the village get to do now with cannabis?
So it sounds like there may be a legal research question, which I was just going to say, I don't know if Robin has the answer to this, as I know he did some research into this. So Robin, why don't you kick that away?
Okay, well, we've been meeting, Weasel, myself, Darren, have been meeting to talk about this. We've been liaising with Greg. It's an opt-in at the minute for cannabis. It looks like it's not going to be the same as Liquor Control Board. There's going to be a board, Cannabis Control Board, appointed by the governor. They will make the rules. So at the moment, and talking to other planners in Chittenden County, we've been looking at areas where we may not want to have anything happen. So it's about as far as we're going to go at the moment. We're going to have maybe an overlay map that says that no cannabis can be sold in these areas, you know, routes to school, things like that. But we don't want to go too far down the line in case the Cannabis Control Board comes up with something that we haven't considered. Then we'd have to redo the work all over again. So we're trying to take a broad brush and come up with ideas that won't change no matter what the CCB says. But it is opt-in, and you need a community-wide vote for approval of the opt-in. So it won't be a municipal, there won't be really any municipal decisions outside zoning, planning and zoning. The decisions will all be by the Cannabis Control Board.
And Robin, thanks for that. Does the village get to vote on that opt-in separate from the town?
Not at the moment. If it was a separation, they would.
So we would need to find out then, should the town vote to authorize to opt in, and the village forms as a separate city, can the new city re-explore that at that point?
Yes.
Yes, we need to find out, or yes, you're sure that's possible?
Yes, I'm sure that's possible.
How?
Because it's a new ball game. It's completely new entity. Just like if you separated, the Liquor Control Board would be with the village, and there would be one with the town. So.
Yeah, I agree.
And what happens if the town approves it and an entity opens in the village, and the village decides that not so fast anymore, we changed our minds? Or as a new city, we don't want it. We don't want cannabis in the city. We don't have to go through that. We can do this on the back end.
Yeah, it's we're getting
that's the
here.
kind of questions
They haven't really made the rules yet, so.
Yeah. Okay.
We can change our mind. That was in the FAQs. So once the municipality vote, they can vote. It says that they can rescind that vote at a subsequent meeting.
It's like changing your planning and zoning regulations. They're not carved in stone.
But are the businesses that exist grandfathered?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
My only question on that to follow up is, it would be great to know if, since we are a separate municipality with our own land development code and our own rules, does that then allow us to vote on cannabis regardless as to what the town decides to do, regardless of whether the town has a vote or not?
Yes.
My understanding is it's a municipal-wide vote on opting in or not, but we can decide through our planning and zoning regulations which areas we're going to permit it, and we could decide it's one or two zones, or it's one zone, so we can control that.
So my only thing on that is, you know, I hear you saying it's a municipal wide vote. The village is a municipality, as I know you know. So I'm still curious as to whether a village is allowed to do that or not.
My understanding is no, it's the whole community.
So the town.
Yeah, the town, the whole community.
It's reserved for towns.
It's reserved for, Johnston could vote on it, it's a village. It's reserved for any one community. We're one community at the minute. We don't get two votes.
But we're not one community.
And Andrew,
Like I don't.
I've made
Go ahead, Brad.
Andrew to I'll reach out and try and get an answer. I know it's unclear because it very clearly says municipalities, which we are. I agree. So it's not clear when a municipality is within a municipality. So I will reach out and try and get a formal answer on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It'll take a while, Brad, because the Cannabis Control Committee hasn't really met yet. So, but yeah, good idea.
Yeah, I understand that their rules were supposed to, I believe, already have been created and or supposed to have been developed for October, which from what I've heard in the news, they're not even close to getting ready for, and are looking to kick that down the road.
I don't think they were appointed until the end of October, Andrew. So.
I just got an email that they were meeting. I don't remember the date, but if you go on to the website that I think was linked in here, you can sign up to get their agendas and meetings.
The governor appointed the 3 members a while ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then they send out agendas and stuff, so you know when they're meeting and that what they're talking about, and that was on the agenda to talk about at the next meeting, the rules.
Yep. Yep. I'll do some more research on that one.
Okay. I think we've discussed this robustly. So if I add anything more, I will only say that I agree that none of this, whatever we decide, shouldn't be on the ballot in November. I think it should be up. I agree with you, Andrew. And if we come up with, I'm not fundamentally, systemically opposed to splitting with the town, even, under the circumstances of going forward with separation, because right now, I don't know about cannabis, putting the whole cannabis issue aside, but just the local option tax, I understand that the state has a hard time right now distinguishing where a business is. Is it in Essex Junction or outside of Essex Junction? And if that's the state's problem, we can't insist that the state fix that problem for our sake. We're gonna have to accommodate the state. And since we have to do that in order to accommodate the state, if that means we share with Essex Town, I don't have a problem with that. Okay? My humble opinion. But it looks like we've got months to discuss it and do more research.
Plenty of time.
Yep.
And plenty of time for the state to figure it out. I think we're all set on that one, Brad.
Great, so the last item on the work session is the FAQs from our Village Our Voices folks. Those were included in the packet for your review. There was a general set and a business-related set. I can't tell if Elaine is on or not, and if she is, I'd be putting her on the spot. But if, Andrew, if you would permit it, it might be good to offer Elaine the opportunity to just give a quick update. I wasn't able to connect with her today or yesterday, and so if she's available for a quick update, that would be great. But if not, you have the FAQs, and we could certainly make sure that at the next work session, Elaine has some updates for you all.
So to answer your question, yes, I would certainly allow some time on the floor for Elaine. As I'm looking through the attendees, I'm not seeing her name though.
Okay.
But regardless, the FAQs I think look great. I also really appreciate that there is that distinction of a resident version and a business version, as those questions are not the same.
Yep, agreed.
There was one portion, though, where it talked about voting on separation and how that process would work. And if I remember it correctly, I believe it says that mail-in voting is not allowed. And my understanding was mail-in voting is allowed. We are allowed to do it on special items and not just our regular annual meeting. As I thought Susan McNamara Hill, our clerk, had already cleared that up.
Yes, that should be corrected.
Yep.
Great.
And we've always been proceeding that there will be a mail-in vote for the independence question, the charter change question in November.
Great. Other than that, I had no other comments on it.
Andrew, Gabrielle Smith is one of the principals for our Village Our Voices, and she is in the meeting if you want to give her a minute to address anything in this.
Yes, absolutely, Gabrielle. If there's something that you want to make sure that the trustees hear, or if you have any new information, we'd certainly love to hear it. If not, we understand that too.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Raj.
Still there, Gabrielle?
All right, well, that's disappointing. Oh, you're
Can you
there?
guys hear me? I think my signal just dropped.
Yeah, we
There we
got you.
go.
Sorry about that. We'll make sure that gets updated online. The point you just made about the ballots. And I just wanted to make you available if you all have any other questions about what our Villager Voice is working on with the FAQs or anything else.
I don't have any other questions personally. I don't know if other trustees do.
Do not.
Thanks.
Nothing
else. Thanks.
Okay.
Gabrielle, can I just ask you, what are you going to do with these? Where are they going?
So the FAQs are primarily going to be living online because they're relatively lengthy, and also as you mentioned, there is that format where it's, if you go into the FAQs online, you can see the short and then you can click on the long.
Okay.
So it is really designed to be online. These are really lengthy. When you print them out, people can print them out. We aren't handing them out in that manner. We are featuring them. We are featuring FAQs of the week on our website and on Facebook. Because as we hear from people what's on their mind in the moment, we try to be responsive with those and also get ahead of some of those that are that we think are most relevant for people. So it is really about trying to balance accurate, solid information to people that's timely, but also not overwhelming them. So we're using them as a source of information to highlight, to get out to the community. And then if people really want to dig in deep or look up a particular question, we do have them sorted by subject.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
You're welcome.
That's all we had on the work session, Andrew.
Brad, thank you as always.
Sure.
I've just got to get back to the beginning of my packet here. All right, so next up, business item 5B, the discussion with the police chief about Earl Street, about the incident on Earl Street.
Chief.
Saw Chief.
Hi, good evening, folks. Hello, how are you?
Good, and yourself?
I am just fine this evening.
Appreciate you being here today.
Not a problem.
So with this, I asked for it to be on the agenda as I know this is something that happened in the village that certainly has concerned a fair number of people. And I've heard from a few members of the community just about what is the police department doing to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of me saying things, I'd love for you to be able to articulate it best, as I believe only you can.
I appreciate the opportunity. So since the last press release that we put out, where we basically explained what had happened and what we were going to do, since then we've been busy with a few things. First and foremost is the case was reassigned to another supervisor who has been investigating that by going back through all of the statements, reconducting interviews, and he finished up his investigation and submitted that to the state's attorney's office on Friday. So they have the case. They'll be looking through that. One thing that I need to be careful of tonight and in talking about this is I do not want to talk about the actual facts of the case because of the integrity of it, and I want to make sure that is utmost in my mind. On top of investigating the case, the weekend afterwards, we did get Mr. Williams' motorcycle back to him. We were able to negotiate that with the person who was working on it. So we did do that the following weekend in order to make sure that the parties had what they wanted and what they needed, and hopefully that has worked out, somewhat for those two folks. Most importantly, I've been meeting with Tabitha Moore. I've met with her several times over the last couple of weeks to evaluate, what exactly was involved in this incident, and how we handled it and how we can go forward by making a difference in our department. Through those conversations, which have included the officers who were working that night, we've had a conference with them, with myself and Tabitha as well, where we got their feelings about what had happened. We made it clear about the department goals as to what we expect moving forward. And we have also started working on what we would consider a training process for our officers, and maybe even pushing it out to other officers in the state of Vermont. So the way that we look at this now is we see an opportunity. And what I will consider this opportunity is for us to be able to do better and more informed investigations overall, not just in disturbances or those types of incidents, but in all investigations. And we want ourselves to be better when we do our job in all aspects. So in order to do that, we believe we need to be able to connect our officers with thinking more about just probable cause. And for years, law enforcement has functioned simply as, if you have probable cause, you may act on it. We want our officers to think farther than that, and do more to get past that. We're problem solvers when it comes down to it. And I talked to Evan about this today. When it comes down to our primary job is to solve problems, whether that's with an arrest or whether that's not with an arrest. Then that's up to the officer to determine, but we're always looking or want to look for the best course of action. So similar to what we have done with sexual assault investigations and domestic assault investigations over the years, when I first came out of the academy, the way that we handled domestic violence investigations was that if you had probable cause to believe one party or the other committed a crime, then you acted on that and you arrested that person. That is just not simply how we do things now. We have learned that that's not how we should act in those situations, and that's not a proper way of solving the problem. So over the years, we've received more training. We've done various classes throughout the years in order to get to where we are now, where we are considering prior trauma in those investigations and more factors than just simply, probable cause. So I think that's where we need to go. As a department, we need to bring that into our realm as far as all of our investigations. And in speaking with Tabitha, we need to be considerate of prior harm that's been done by law enforcement to the BIPOC community, and we need to have that also in our minds while we are interacting and investigating those crimes. So we are in the process of putting together some type of training program that will be for our officers, and we are thinking, or at least we're considering, that may be pushed out to all of the officers in the state if that was something that the state training council would be interested in. Our current fair and impartial policing training that comes from the academy is very basic. Obviously, they have to make it available for 12 police officers to do in a short amount of time, so it's pretty basic. And I think that this might be something that could be added to that. And this line of learning could be added to that in order to make it a more informed program for all law enforcement in Vermont. So that's where we're seeing it going. The last thing that I will mention is that we've also talked, and that was in my press release, was that we are talking about conducting a class for citizens on, what exactly is the criminal justice process? What does it mean to be issued a citation? What does it mean to be arrested? What does a lodging mean? Those are all terms that come from Vermont state law and Rule 3 that most citizens may not be familiar with, but a police officer lives with every day when they're working. So it would be beneficial for us to be able to do that type of training, or at least a class and it could even be a question and answer session where we have, a law enforcement professional come in who can talk about, what Rule 3 is and how the criminal justice process works, but also have someone else and maybe a defense attorney come in and be part of that panel and talk to people about how to advocate for themselves when they're in the middle of the criminal justice process. So that is something we're working with. I had an initial conversation today with Aaron McGuire, and thinking maybe View could be involved in that, and maybe sponsor that, or at least help us put that together. But that could be something we could partner with. So that is where we're at. That is what we are doing to ensure what we're doing is the correct thing. Obviously, it's hard for any professional department to be able to say that they didn't handle something as well as it should have been. And we are certainly not proud of what was happening that night or how we handled that, but we have gone back and we are conducting the investigation properly, and we are seeing that it's being taken care of, and we're moving forward with training for our officers.
Thank you, Chief Fogg. I do appreciate that. Appreciate the honesty and being so forthcoming and saying that, as a professional department, it's hard to admit those types of things, and it's great to hear you say those, or hear you say that. I have a couple of questions, or really just one question. As the Board of Trustees, we don't have, if you will, have the police department in the village's budget. We don't set necessarily the policies that guide the police department. How can we help you? How can we help the officers to best help the community in situations like this?
Well, I think every single person on the board is a citizen of our purview, of the town of Essex and of the village. So we would take your advice as much as anybody else's. So I think the best way to support us is to understand that we need your support. Obviously, we need the support of the voters, and being able to have you advocate for proper policy, and certainly, that's why we are being more transparent. We're putting our policies online. They are on our website, and certainly we take your opinions of those policies as serious as anyone else's. So.
Before I move off to something unrelated, other trustees, do you have questions or comments?
No, I appreciate all that you're doing, Chief, and all the members of the police department. I have the utmost respect for every member of the police department, civilian staff as well. I know how difficult it gets at times. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So do they.
I'd just like to add, this is Raj. I appreciate your approach on this topic, this incident, and I'm really appreciative that you're recognizing it as the opportunity that it is. I think this is one of the best results of having the task force impaneled, your participation on it, your openness, and leadership in that role, and your I'm incredibly enthusiastic and appreciative of your recognition of this, and I think it's also a great opportunity for Essex PD to, you develop that training, and this becomes a model for the state. I think that's something to be very proud of. So I hope that works out.
I will say, Raj, that my involvement in the task force over the last year really paid off when this started. The connections that I have made and the relationships that I've made through that, and the learning that I've done by being involved in that really helped during this situation. So.
And I can tell you from hearing from other people in the community and other members of that task force, I think they'd say the same. I think that they've learned a lot from interacting with you and your officers and learning more about how the department works. There's a lot of work to be done all around still. But I think, as unfortunate as this was, I think that it has been an opportunity, and I'm grateful you're taking advantage of it. So
thank you.
If you don't mind, Raj or Chief Hogue, whoever would like to, for those who may be new to this conversation and are unaware as to what that task force is, would you mind just giving the high-level view?
Sure. So the task force that we're talking about is the task force on racial justice. That's a title that was kind of given to a group of citizens that we've basically been meeting with since last September. The town and village, did initial surveys of folks and found that there were issues out there that needed to be addressed. So we started listening sessions, and then along with the unified manager and several other folks from the town and village government, we've been consistently meeting with these folks over the last 8 months now. I believe we are at almost a year, where we have now split into, I believe, 3 groups. One that focuses on policing issues, one that's on governance, and the other one's on communications. And those individual groups of the larger group have been meeting over the summer just to talk about and learning basically from each other. Raj is exactly right. We've been learning from each other about how citizens' feelings are about how things are handled, in addition to learning more about the police department and how government works. And they've been very productive meetings. And we're hoping to come out of that with some recommendations for, best practices moving forward and things that we can do that will move the ball.
I just want to add one small thing, and not to bring everything back to the elephant in the room of separation, but I think this is one of the reasons why it's critically important that we are able to maintain a relationship with Essex Police. And I think this is one area where we've been successful in working with the select board and the police department. And I really hope the community recognizes that and sees the benefit.
I would agree with that.
And what I can add, if you don't mind, is, not only in the police department, but in other operations of the village and the town, we are looking at relationship building with the BIPOC community and the broader community. We are looking at ways that we can build relationships, but also building a workforce that is representative of the community, including the representation of the BIPOC community and others that represent the population. We have about a 10-11% minority population, yet we don't have that reflective in the workforce of the village or the town. So we want to work on issues of how do we reach out, how do we recruit, how do we retain, do our policies and our procedures reflect what we're trying to achieve, many of which have probably been established for 20 years, but have never really been relooked at to see, are they producing the results we want to see in today and moving forward versus, yeah, they were fine 20 years ago, they're fine today. As an example, both boards, select board and the village board, have now instituted stipends for being on committees and commissions. That was directly related to this committee's work, stating that if you want representation from people, some people have to pay for babysitters, they have to buy a pizza, they have to feed their kids, and they just don't have the time or wherewithal to sit on these committees. And a little bit of a stipend can help get more people to the table than what we've been getting. So as an just as those as examples. And we've all been learning about the process. And I would say, Chief, your comment that the committee helping you through this ordeal, if you will, or the arrest, and giving you guidance on what, or at least feedback on what you think you should do, was invaluable.
Yep.
Thanks.
So the only other thing that I just wanted to briefly mention is just my appreciation to Chief Hogue, to you and the department with regards to National Night Out. While I did not attend, that certainly did appear from what I saw online. It looks to be quite the wonderful event, quite the wonderful opportunity. I understand nobody got sick from salmonella or undercooked burgers or hot dogs, which is great. We certainly don't want to.
If they were going to be burnt.
And Evan would tell you that's why we had rescue sitting right next to him.
Oh, perfect.
we
Good
thought
planning on that one.
would fall out from the heat, but anyway.
Yeah, but I appreciate you all doing that, as from my memory, we haven't had an event like that before for this purpose, so thank you.
No, you're very welcome, and we intend on doing that every year. It's that was one of the goals that I had when I was promoted to chief last year, was re-engaging the public and doing these types of events. And I can't throw enough credit towards my staff who took the idea and ran with it. I had the idea, but I gave it to them, and they ran with it and did a fantastic job with it. So I certainly had a good time. If anyone wasn't there, you certainly missed some good food and a good time. So.
Chief, I hate to put you on the spot, but maybe some thank yous of those you can remember, all the agencies that helped make that event.
There were a lot. So we had the national, we had Essex Rescue. We had Essex Junction Fire Department, the town fire department, the town and village public works together. We had, let's see, the CJC, Essex Westford School District, provided most of the help for the food and supplied us with, obviously, refrigeration to store things, and the grill that you were running, all of that. Let's see, who else? We had
National.
The National Guard.
Highway safety.
Yep, Governor's Highway Safety. Geez, I'm trying to think in my head, who else was it? We had tons. It was.
But also, everything was free.
Yeah, and everything was free, and that was, and it really, I think out of budgeted funds, I think we spent like $300 or something like that for just like giveaway items from us, from the police department, and everything else was virtually donated. And that's why I said I can't give enough credit to Corporal John Rutenberg for going out there and beating the bushes and getting these great companies to help us out. Every one of them was a local company that donated so that we could put that on and make it free for everybody. So we couldn't have done it without them, and we couldn't have done it without John out there actually going and asking. So it was a great event.
Trustees, anything else?
That's great. I'm good.
I'm good.
Great. Well, Chief Hogue, thank you again. Thank you as always. Appreciate you being here tonight. I just need to find my agenda. What's next is the public nuisance ordinance. Yes. And trash hauling as well. And I believe we have Lieutenant Kissinger here to help us with that.
Yes, I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Well, so for a little bit of background, if you don't mind, so this public nuisance ordinance is a new one, at least for the village. We didn't have a public nuisance ordinance. We had a few ordinances which addressed some components of this, but nothing that was all in one.
Correct. A lot of the ordinances by both municipalities are outdated. And this was our attempt to bring things that would address issues that we've had to deal with over the years where it wasn't backed by ordinance. And this was the outcome of that, to try to give us some sort of teeth, so to speak, that doesn't rise to the criminal level, but allows us to take some type of civil action against a person who is causing a disturbance.
Thank you for that, and I do apologize. It seems as if my audio feed cut out for a moment there, so I missed a portion of it, but I think I know where you went with it. So in terms of the ordinance and where we are now, I had some comments that I think are within the memo. One being, I assume that when it says village/town, that for the village, any mention of the town of Essex would just go away and or just be replaced with Village of Essex Junction. Is that correct?
Yes. When this was submitted to the attorneys, they just took both those out and put municipality. So I don't know if legally at this point, if we have to put the village or the town, or if we can leave it as municipality and serving both separate municipalities if it does go that route.
Yeah, that's a good question for an attorney to answer.
He crossed those out. So the newest version, I think, probably did not get to you, the members of the trustees. I just sent that out on Monday, but that's where the attorney had crossed out both of those.
Okay. I had another comment along that line where there was a portion of 6.11.160 Part C just had a reference to the town of Essex. And that was just one of those that would need to be replaced with Village of Essex Junction. Another request I had is when we talk about noise, if noise could be replaced with sound, just as there's a sound, just as there is a difference between a noise versus a sound, and we're really monitoring sound at that point.
Sure.
Also, there were some gender pronouns that if we could just be gender neutral in this, use they, them, their, as opposed to he/she. But then
definitely
the bigger thing for me is a fair amount of these ordinances. I don't know how they would possibly be enforced, and we've certainly heard over the years from many residents, in particular with sound, whether it be, Wolfgar ends and all of a sudden there's a whole host of cars rolling around on our roads that really seem like they are making a higher level of sound than they should, and or some motorcycles that may be making a higher level of sound than they should. How do we enforce this?
The mufflers would be hard for decibels. I think in the version that I sent out to the trustees yesterday, there's a current ordinance that I omitted for whatever reason, but I put back in. It says the defect in vehicle operation of a vehicle, the tires of the operation of an automotive or motorcycle which creates squealing tires, loud and unnecessary grating, grinding, or exploding type rattling noises. So that section doesn't really necessarily need a decibel reading. The fact that someone is intentionally causing their car to backfire by revving the engine and taking the gas off, we could use that section of the ordinance as a violation. The decibel reading was more or less to provide a objective manner to address concerns of sound violations, where in the past it's always been subjective. So we were looking at a way how we could objectively come up with some type of criteria to measure sound and thresholds which would be considered more than a reasonable amount of sound.
Okay. My last question is, so similar to speeding, for instance, there are ways in which I remember there was a period of time where I lived in New York City, and I remember there were a few intersections where whenever a light turned red, if a vehicle was too close to the intersection, there was a camera that would automatically take a picture, and then somebody would be sent a ticket. Or now, when you're in Boston and you're going through the tunnel, the way you pay your toll is automated, and if you don't have the speed pass or whatever it's called, you then get a nice friendly ticket in the mail if you didn't pay your toll. Is there a way that in Vermont we can leverage technology to help with some of this, whether that be sound, traffic, or other enforcement, so that way you all can be doing other things?
There is technology available for running stoplights. We do have a lot of those offenses that currently occur at the five corners specifically. When we looked at this probably 5 years ago, it was cost prohibitive. I could try and get some updated numbers for that. Back then, the Judicial Bureau was willing to hear those cases. We would need a camera that captures the license plate and also the driver compartment of the vehicle so we could find out and address who the driver was. So we're not issuing a ticket to somebody borrowing the car. With that being said, you would need to probably hire a person just to run all those violations and research and issue those tickets.
For a later on in our reading file, we have a memo from Sarah about budget items. So before I lose that train of thoughts, would love to see a proposal as to what it would take to actually do that, and in particular at five corners and or other intersections where we know that there are many people who run stop signs. Would like to have some data to make an informed decision of if it costs 20, 40, 50, 100,000, 200,000 to put some figures to that so we could make a decision as to whether that might be an investment worth making or not.
And can I just add to that, if there's any equipment that does both trigger or speed? So in other words, and yeah.
Can I?
Sure. There's a whole host of hands up. I don't know who went, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm not using the online thing, but anyways, just quick comment. Bicycles as well as vehicles are required to stop at stop signs and stoplights. So this isn't just something that would address vehicles. It's also through these things. Officer discretion is very important part of the job. As the chief was expressing earlier about arrests back in the day when you had probable cause to do something, as you went out and you arrested them. Well, people would often tell me during my career in law enforcement, well, why didn't you get the other person? Well, I would stop everybody I could, and then you got to consider the totality of circumstances. Was this person, 1 mile over the speed limit? Because where do you draw the line on where you write a speeding ticket? Was this person in a line of traffic that got stopped at the five corners, which often happens when you have a large vehicle stopping to make a turn across traffic, and now they're stopped and the light changes and they're in the traffic. You want them to stay there and block the intersection. So there's a lot to be put into this, guys, just so that you all know. I know the chief, the lieutenant are aware of that, but just so everybody out there listening and watching knows, there's a lot more to this than just meets the eye.
Thank you for that, Dan. And Chief Hogue, were you going to respond to something that I had said?
No, I was going to make a follow-up to what the lieutenant was talking about. So whenever you want.
Why don't you go ahead, and then I think that the trustees have other questions.
Okay, so one thing I'll follow in with what Dan just said is and I think we had a discussion about this previous in regards to traffic calming, plans and those types of things. And many of those don't involve enforcement. Those aren't always. The enforcement isn't always the answer to things. Road designs and those types of things, and education always play a big part in those. Second thing is, I would have to check, but my understanding the last time that I talked about this was that a ticket needs to be written to the actual driver of the vehicle and not the registered owner. So that's what the lieutenant was talking about, was we would have to identify every person who is actually driving a vehicle. And how we do that would be the question. Even if a system took a photograph of the person driving, we would then have to identify who that person is, whether they're the registered owner, to be able to issue tickets. That's just the way Vermont law is. So those systems would be great, but I think we have to get over those hurdles first. But certainly we can check into that before we go forward with anything else. But the other thing I wanted to talk, just briefly go back, is the noise ordinance. We brought this noise ordinance. This is basically from Williston. and what they adopted a few years ago, and it was basically designed for us to have a better way of an officer out there at 10 p.m. trying to measure whether the sound at this other house when they're at a complaint is actually a violation and not just what they think is a violation. So that's why it's more detailed than what the noise ordinance is now. So there's that. In your memo also from, I think you guys have this, we had some concerns about the disorderly conduct section that was in this original ordinance that was given to you. And that came about after we went back and looked at this after you guys had your last meeting and talked about various issues in this. And we started looking at this and really started looking at that disorderly conduct section as possibly running into like First Amendment issues as to whether we can hold someone, criminally liable for making statements in a public place. We start running into First Amendment issues with that. So there's new language that's been inserted into that. I don't know, like the lieutenant said, if you guys have that updated copy or not, but I would urge you to look at that and that memo, because we did make that change, and we would recommend going to the new language and not what is currently in that copy you guys previously viewed. So that's all I had for now.
Thank you for that, Chief Hogan. That certainly makes sense. I think it said that the ACLU had found that, or that the courts had found that to be potentially unconstitutional, and we certainly don't want that.
Correct. That was another section of it in regards to loitering and for vagrancy and those types of things, and that's another issue all in itself. I don't think we should have that one in there as well.
Great. Thank you. Raj, I think you had your hand up first, and then Amber. Raj, you're muted.
Sorry, we're going to have a separate conversation around the trash ordinance. Are we doing that now?
I think it's all the same ordinance.
Okay. I guess I'll say what I brought up the last time we had a very brief conversation about this. There's two comments I have about that section, and it's the difference in morning time of 6 a.m. versus 7, and 7 seems to be the delineating time through almost the entirety of the rest of this ordinance for noise. So I would like to see that match, or else figure out why we'd have one thing different. I just don't see the difference between banging dumpsters and anything else. And the distance of 200 feet seems, I realize there's a very rudimentary map of an example of what 200 feet looks like. But it's arbitrary. Unless there's a good reason why 200 feet, aside from being what another municipality used, the village is dense and getting denser. If you look like I did at the same area that's in the sample that we got as a map, and you explore all the way down Pearl Street, all the way down all the trunk roads and everything else we have in the village, it's 8-foot distance between the 200 foot in this one and the house next to it. It's a setback difference, and there's no measurable difference in sound between the dumpster slamming back down onto a truck from one house and not the other. And so I would just like to see this, as dense as we are, just blanket time with no distance. Now, I realize we're trying to match this with the town, and I can see, the town's becoming a little more dense in some areas, but mostly it's a lot more spread out. So that might make more sense for the more rural areas of the town. So for the village area, the new city, I think that the distance is probably just not appropriate. I don't know how we do that, especially as we infill.
The distance, Raj, that was not something that we came up with. That was submitted, I believe, by Robin to get the discussion started. Wilson's ordinance, theirs is 500 feet. So you can definitely increase that, whatever the trustees feel comfortable with, to give that buffer. And then as far as putting everything the same, I don't know if that would work, reducing the decibels to a different time period. I know it's only an hour, but that would be an hour which they could start making noise earlier.
Yeah, I guess I'm just having a hard time. You know, if someone's regularly running a saw, you know, if a contractor, you know, we get some complaints from work being done around the village too early, as we know.
Correct.
So let's say that area we've heard about a lot has 10 dumpsters within earshot. So that could take up to 15, 20 minutes to empty all of those, and it'd be rather loud. I guess I'm trying to figure out the difference between construction noise for that half an hour and dumpster noise for that half an hour. To me, it just doesn't make any sense why it would be different. So this may be one of those areas where we can't align, but I don't think so. I realize we've got two boards to talk about this, and the areas are very different. You know, they do have that area around the Essex experience, but other than that, I mean, I guess up along 15, but in the town outside the village. But I think for the village, we're just so dense that I have a hard time separating. And 500 feet, if we did that, that would pretty much be a blanket nothing anyway at this point, you know. So I guess that's kind of the point. I don't know what the other trustees think about it. Or...
While we're on that topic of trash, to me, what I think would be helpful is we know approximately, or someone can find out approximately what decibel level does a dumpster when it closes or when it lands, what that decibel level is. There's then, I assume, some mathematical problem that can say, here's how when that sound travels, how far does it have to travel to go from, let's say, 100 decibels down to 60 or 80? So then that way we know how far away from the dumpster does that buffer need to be, so that we can make sure that we have an appropriate distance. If that's 200 feet, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, we can then use math to say that if you're within 1,000 feet, when that 80 decibel dumpster hits, it's only going to sound like 60 decibels. So then it's not an issue. But to everybody within that radius, then it's an issue. So if we could have that kind of that kind of information, I think would help to guide this information outside of us just making off-the-cuff decisions about a buffer zone.
Yeah, except that depending on the atmospherics, I can either hear the guy in the dunk tank next to Amber's house at the fairgrounds at my house facing the other direction, or I can't. So it's just gonna, I think there's far too many variables in that algorithm to that, but I don't know sound, so I have no idea.
According to Google, the average garbage truck now produces 83 decibels and some go as high as 90, and that's just the truck itself. So I'm not factoring anything in, but it's on the internet, so it has to be true.
But I do think that would helpful, or I think that type of information would be helpful. Yes, understanding that no, we can't recreate every condition for 365 days in a year, but we can just generally have some understanding. Because what I'm unsure with is, I think, say what Raj you're saying is, do we want 200 feet, 500 feet, 700 feet, 1,000 feet? We could just arbitrarily make a number, or we could have some facts to try to make an informed decision.
Well, I would just advocate taking the distance out, because as I was making the argument, there is no real distance in the village where you're not going to disturb somebody. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to do an overlay on the village itself, especially in the business area, which happens to include the streets that come into town centers. That's just my opinion. We obviously, you know, research is a good thing. So I'm not trying to shut you down with that idea. I'm just thinking, do we need the distance at all?
You may very well be right, as I think the only property where that wouldn't apply to is Global Foundries, where they are much further than 500 feet, or I assume their dumpsters are much further than 500 feet from the nearest residence. Chief Hogue, was that your hand in response to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I had a question for Raj. Actually, the first one, you were talking about the times being the same. Are you thinking of increasing this section to 7 a.m. or moving the other ones to 6?
I would say 7.
Right. So move this one to 7. The other thing that I would say is I kind of have to agree with you in that taking the distance out of this would make sense to me, because I don't want our officers having to be trying to measure distance in order to determine whether they have a violation or not. If the real problem is, and I think Robin was probably the impetus for this, if the real problem is just simply noise in the central area of the village, then we can deal with that with just a time limit and not having to have a distance on it.
Go ahead, Amber.
Everybody already said what I was going to say. But that's what I had wrote a note to myself, that I would increase the time to 7 o'clock and totally remove any distance. Just looking at that buffer zone, I mean, again, everybody's already said this, but just looking at that buffer zone of the 200 feet, I was laying in bed at 5 o'clock this morning and I could hear the trash cans, and I'm just like, if you flip that circle around, I'm on the other side of that 200 feet. So I would definitely be in favor of just removing it in general. I think that also corresponds with, again, what the chief said. You don't want to have to be getting out your tape measure to determine whether that really is true or not, distance-wise. And it does correspond with the previous section about machinery and stuff. I mean, there is no limitation as to where you are allowed to start a saw at 7 a.m. or not start a saw. I do think there is some concern about whether this, if we're trying to have universal and the town fall under the same ordinance. There are a couple sections in here about like the open fires and stuff where there are specific statements about the town and if there are exemptions that we can make if that's an issue. But I would definitely agree with everything that's been said.
Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, a couple things. First, Chief, I want to disabuse you of the notion that I brought this up. Several residents brought it to the trustees' attention, and we were asked to take a look at it.
My apologies, Robin. I was misinformed.
Donuts.
I apologize as well, Robin.
So we did look at what other municipalities do. That's where we come up with the R's. We wrote, I think there's a memo that the trustees have. We wrote to 5 or 6 trash haulers in the village, give them the sample, the couple of sentences that I put into your ordinance, about times. Everyone got back and they said they had no issues with the times. Most of them said they weren't actually in the village at that time, although for the Amber somebody is. One thing I should remember to bring up is that during the fair, Casella comes to the fair to pick up their trash at 6 a.m. those 10 days. I don't know whether that's a fair waiver or not, but I like the idea of not having a distance, absolutely. And if memory serves, there were 2 or 3 residents who brought this up as an issue. It wasn't a large group of people.
Thank you for that, Robin. And certainly I do agree that we haven't heard from a large mass of residents saying, you know, why are the trash trucks making so much noise? I think many of us have come to just live with many situations as just being what they are, and we have some who are just voicing their concerns. But from what I'm hearing, yeah, let's take out the radius altogether. That makes a lot of sense, especially Amber, thanks for pointing out there are other portions in this ordinance where it says, you know, except for the town of Village, or except for the town of Essex, with regards to burning. You know, if we need to do something like that, then let's go ahead and do it. Trustees, are there any other? Go ahead, Amber.
Can we get a copy of that updated ordinance from the attorney that has the, we did not get it. This one came out over the weekend, before the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't.
I'm happy to forward it, Amber, too. It was with the memo, but yeah, we'll get.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Thanks.
came on Monday night, so yeah.
Got it. I had one little, I think, change. I gotta admit that I have not read through this, like, you know, as closely as I probably should, but on the aggressive panhandling section, I think the goal there was anybody who's acting in an aggressive manner. Is that the case? And why I'm asking that is that, aggressive is not necessarily defined, aggressive manner is. That makes sense.
It does. That was the intent, is to limit the aggression. It's not against the law to panhandle, but we find a lot of people that are obstructing traffic, and I guess that would fall under the definition under aggressive. It's just try to keep everybody safe, but allow them to do what is allowed for them to do, to panhandle. It just, sometimes people get a little more aggressive in trying to acquire items, and we're just trying to get ahead of something so we have it already on the books and we can tailor it to whatever the trustees decide or do not like in that.
Hey, Amber, the aggressive manner is defined in the definitions at the front of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Aggressive isn't. It's like, it's a semantics thing, kind of. If you're looking for aggressive manner, it's not, but aggressive is. So I just kind of like put in there begging, panhandling, or solicitation in an aggressive manner versus aggressive begging. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's the attorney in me, sorry. I can't ever turn it off. I'm sorry.
All right, Raj, go ahead.
I think I answered my own question, sorry.
Good talk. So it would be great, we've made some comments here, to be able to have another revisit of this after those edits have been able to happen. And to have this come up at our next meeting, maybe at that point in time, we'd be able to pass it as proposed. Unless there are any other, all right, go ahead.
Quick question. The soliciting license required area, is that intended, as I skimmed through it, because I didn't see this in my downloaded packet earlier, is that intended for just mobile, for incidental or mobile vendors, like somebody sets up shop at Five Corners as a pizza food truck, or if someone decides to sell jewelry next to them or something?
It does cover that. It also covers like the people, we don't have it so much now as we did probably 10 years ago, where we'd have people trying to sell books to earn money for college, putting money for a college vacation. We used to get them coming. So it's a way of keeping track who's coming into the town, and allows us to maybe see if there's any other complaints against them in the prior towns where they've worked. It's just a way to keep track of who's coming in, selling, what are they selling, make sure they have a proper ID that can be displayed. Not all of them have IDs that tell them or identify what they're doing. So this is one way we can try and control that.
Do we, I understand that. Do we do the same thing for brick and mortar or online in the town? Do we visit storefronts or other businesses and check and make sure they've got I'm just curious how we enforce one over the other, and I guess we don't have to get into a lengthy discussion, but it struck me as I mean, I have a small business, but I don't have any kind of town, permit or registration for it. Maybe I shouldn't say that in a meeting.
No, I think this is more geared towards just the fly-by-night sales operations coming into town, not the businesses. The businesses will already go through a permitting process, whether it be in the village or the town. So that's kind of where this was kind of going at, is to have a checks and balances for those people that don't have a permitting process coming in here looking to sell goods or merchandise.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Robin. You gonna bust Raj about the permit?
That's one of the things. I'll be checking tomorrow if you've got a home occupation permit, Rash. The other thing is I'm thinking more about the Five Corners. I grew up where intersections had a sign that said, "Do not enter the intersection until your exit is clear." I'm not sure how much that can be enforced, but every morning, Pearl Street traffic going east is blocked by Main Street traffic going south on Park. Now, if those cars waited until their exit was clear, that would stop instantly. It might be $800 for signs, but it might be worth putting up signs saying, "Do not enter the intersection until your exit is clear." Now, of course, the connector road goes in, we close off Main Street, that goes away, but in the interim, it might be worth doing. At least it make people think. Why are you laughing, Raj? I still haven't checked your file.
I don't want to get into it.
You sure, Dan?
What's that?
I just love it. Every chance he gets with the Main Street. It's great.
He's absolutely right.
All right. Any other trustee comments on this?
Don't want to go there. No. Comment, but I'll bite my tongue because we've beaten this pretty good.
All right. Hearing no others, I see Annie Cooper, you have your hand up. Why don't we go ahead and take some public comment?
Thank you. I have my summer voice on from yelling and projecting to children and also through a mask. I'm at work, so my apologies. Just to speak for a moment about Five Corners, things. One is, like Robin said, in New York City, there's a, I can't think of there's a funny conversation about how you don't drive into don't block the box. So I agree with Robin that there should be some kind of understanding, maybe a discussion or a little, campaign about how to handle that and to ensure that you can exit the area. But more importantly to me, as a long-time resident of New York City, I believe that there's a better way to run our lights in Five Corners. I think we have a ridiculous amount of backup at times of day that are historically the same, that don't need to happen if we look at our traffic patterns better. And I implore you to please start to make that happen, because it's a long overdue situation and it's madness.
Thank you, Annie. All right, I think we are all set. Chief Hogue, Lieutenant Kissinger, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and effort in getting this to where it is. Robin, thank you as well.
Very welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have another memo coming up?
I think you're free to go.
No Village Center memo? Okay.
Next up, yeah. Thank you, Robin.
It's in the reading file. It's in the reading file.
That's all right.
Next up, we have consider making the Bike Walk Advisory Committee a 7-member committee. I know we have the memo here, and I thought I saw Micah earlier. Not sure if...
Yep, I'm on.
Oh, there you are. Hi. Not sure if you wanted to introduce this or bring this up to us.
Yeah, it's something we've been talking about for a couple of years now, that the bike committee is a 8-member committee, which is an even number, which from what I understand is a little unusual for committees. we've typically had a little trouble keeping that full, so we decided this was the time to propose bringing that to 7 so that we'd have an odd number committee kind of aligned with the others in the village. So that's our proposal. Thank you.
Makes sense to me, especially, or also given that it looks like there are 2 current vacancies. So along those lines, if anybody has an interest in biking, walking around the village and would like to be a part of helping to advise the trustees on ways that we can help make Essex Junction a more bike walk friendly community, there are 2 openings on the Bike Walk Advisory Committee.
Thanks for the plug. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's what we're here for. And in all seriousness, that there are 2 open seats, now would be a great time to look at changing the makeup. I have no questions, comments, or concerns. Not seeing any others from trustees.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
All right, and Mike, I assume you're looking for this and that you want that?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Wanted to make sure that ambiguity was there. If someone wants to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that the trustees change the Bike Walk Advisory Committee to become a 7-member board.
Second.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great. Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Micah, thanks for sticking with us. And Andy, you as well.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so the next matter is a legal matter which we will handle in executive session, which will move us into the consent agenda.
Move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, George. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I had
Oh. Go ahead, Raj.
I just had a quick correction. Sorry. Couldn't get unmuted in time. Line 103 from our last board meeting. I'm trying to pull it up. That whack thing went quicker than I thought. Who knew?
You said our last meeting?
Yeah, so the 7/27.
Where it says trustees gave the select board a lot of material last week and that perhaps it would be good to let
them know which of the items in the material are high priority ones. I believe I was reminding the select board that we prioritize those materials for them. And because I've heard from a couple people on this, I just wanted to set the record straight and say, and that perhaps the select board could address the items as we have prioritized them.
So how would you like that to
yeah,
read?
So Mr. Chawla said that the trustees gave the select board a lot of materials last week and that perhaps the select board could address the items as we have prioritized them.
Okay, great. So
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda with the amendment that edit that Raj has brought up. If George is willing to.
I'm willing to change I'll second that.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your changes to that motion. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, passed unanimously. So now in bringing that up, I lost where I am. Into the reading file. And board member comments.
I have a comment, Andrew. Unfortunately, Robin left before I could ask, but so I'll just ask it now and maybe we can find out later. But it said the possibility of public parking in 11 Park Street has been put on hold, and I'm trying to understand what that means. That's the parking lot that we were going to we were going to use downtown economic development money. Is that what we're talking about? Is that what we're talking about? I don't.
Yes.
And yes. So I would like to just understand why that's been put on hold, because I understand they're building the garage now. So but it looks like Robin has left. So just make note of that and we can touch on it next time.
Evan, unless it's something that you are able to help answer?
I'm not exactly sure it's something I want to opine on, not knowing all the facts, but we can put something together and send it out to the board members.
Okay.
If there's anything that is needed from us to change that decision, if that's a decision that can be changed at this point in time, let us know.
Okay.
Well, I put on hold by whom? So we don't know.
By the owner.
By the owner. Okay. All right. So we'll need to. All right. Okay. That's it for me. Everything else looks good.
I had a couple of comments. One I alluded to earlier about we had that memo from Sarah about budget priorities, and I don't want to lose the thought of Evan. I know you and I had talked about this, but one of the things I would love to be able to see for our next budget is a concept from staff to help turn our ordinance enforcement from our what I would call as a reactive nature to a proactive nature, and what it would take to do that. We've certainly heard quite a bit over the years about how, the various ordinances we have are not being enforced. And so let's get to a place where we could say, if we want that, here's what it would take to get there. We've kicked that can down the road quite a bit. And so I think it's time for us to, at the board, to have that conversation. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is very similar to what Raj was just saying, during the minutes, is that during the town's public forums, it was referred a couple of times that there were proposals that we as a trustees made to the select boards, that instead of proposals, these were demands. And for those of you who didn't hear that or who missed the first public forum and heard or didn't hear Raj's comment during that first session, I just want to reiterate every proposal from the trustees to the select board regarding separation were included within their packet and presented to the select board, as this was a request of Chairperson Watts. These were proposals. These were far from demands. Furthermore, they were done at the request of Select Board Chairperson Watts. And if anything, we weren't demanding anything, but rather we were fulfilling a request from the Select Board leadership. So I wanted to make sure to set that record straight. Also at the listening sessions, one of the things I found curious, surprising, not sure the right word here, is that there's a proposal potentially coming from the town to include the village's fire department within the town's budget. I find this kind of surprising, as this is nothing that we've talked about with the select board. And I had a brief phone call with the Essex Junction Fire Department Fire Chief, Chief Gaborio, and it wasn't anything that he was made aware of either. So I just found that curious and interesting as to how it got to the level of being a potential proposed topic without the trustees at least being asked whether it might be something that we'd be interested in. I know in the previous histories, we've worked towards aligning fire department policies and procedures, but we've never talked about having the budget put into the town's budget. I guess we'll hear more about that at a future joint meeting. Those are all of my comments. Trustees or staff, anything we want to make sure to address before we get into the executive session?
I'm good.
Evan and Marguerite?
Nope.
Great. Now, we have two motions here for the executive session. First one being, I move the trustees make the specific finding that general public knowledge of pending or probable civil litigation to which the public body is or may be a party would place the village at a substantial disadvantage. I'd like to second that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, George. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Great. Second and last one being, I move that the trustees enter into executive session to discuss pending or probable civil litigation to which the public body is or may be a party pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1E to include the unified manager, assistant manager, and water quality superintendent.
Second?
Thank you again, George. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none of those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Great, that passed unanimously. I don't believe we will be returning to, or Jim, are we making a decision?
I hope so.
Okay, so we may very well be returning. But we need the executive session link. Did that get sent out? So if someone could
work on it, yeah. My computer crashed, sorry.
We can go down to the main.
No worries.
I'll send out I'll create a link.
Great. You can email that out.
How about we take a 5-minute
Yeah.
break, clear the room while the link is being sent out?
I think that would be great.
Yep. Perfect.
And then we will be back to make the decision. So thank you all, and we'll see you on the other side. Call us back into regular session on this August 10th meeting. Jim, do you mind reading that motion?
Be happy to. I'm requesting that the village trustees authorize staff to file a legal appeal to the MPDS permit issued to the Essex Junction wastewater facility on July 22nd, 2021.
So moved.
Thank you, Raj.
Second.
Thank you, Dan, and Jim, thanks for reading that. Trustees, any further discussion on that motion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Great, to pass unanimously. Jim, thank you as always for your work on this, your dedication, your eagle eye for details, and your efforts so far. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a lot of help on this one too.
Well, enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right, thank you.
Trustees, we have no other business. If someone wanted to make a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, George. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Good night.
Great. Have a good night, everybody.